Namaste, Hari Om, and welcome to the third session of Hindu Lounge Australia. My name is Rajendra Pandey, and I'm the president of Vishwa Hindu Parishad in South Australia, and also the national spokesperson of this 33-year-old organization in Australia. We have with us today Shri Shashi Holla ji. He's a practicing pharmacist and he runs his own business in Western Australia. Namaste, Shashi ji.
Namaskar.
Shashi ji holds a master's degree in public health from Monash University. After spending 25 years in India, Shashi ji worked for Ministry for Health in Botswana for 10 years and now has been in Australia for last 14 years. Shashi ji was an active Freemason, a rostrum member, and president of the local Lions Club for 2 terms and a zonal chairperson for 2 terms. He is currently pursuing certifications from Hindu University of America and a proud Indic. We also have with us Dr. Shishiraji. Namaste, Shishiraji.
Namaste.
So Dr. Shishiraji is a Sydney-based academic, film and TV producer, and a journalist. He was born in Fiji, where he studied medicine. He migrated to the UK in 1980 and worked as a Metropolitan Police officer for 5 years before retiring to pursue his BA Honours degree in sociology, majoring in race equality issues. He was elected as a councillor in London Borough of Greenwich, and was also a principal race equality officer for a London council. Dr. Rai has made many films and television programs and has written widely on Fiji and global Gurmit issues. Presently, Dr. Rai is producing films, writing, and coordinating international efforts on several projects for the global Gurmitia communities in the diaspora and in India. He is the director of Indian Diaspora Council Australia and president of Global Gurmit Association Incorporated. Thank you, Shashi ji and Satish ji, and welcome to the Hindu Lounge.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the reason we are talking today is to commemorate the 75th independence anniversary of our country, our motherland, India. So this day is celebrated to ignite the feeling of nationalism and patriotism across the country. And every citizen has a different point of view about the independence. As a young boy, I remember this day that we celebrated glory and strength of our country, feeling proud about hoisting our national flag on the Red Fort in India, getting ready in the morning to hear the speech of our Prime Minister speaking from the Red Fort, and most importantly, flying kite in the afternoon and eating laddus. For my parents and grandparents, many others like them, it was a reminder for the suppression and cruelty that our people suffered. That was not only from the Britishers for 200 years, but for more than 450 years of attacks and suppression by Muslim rulers, and the attacks and loot by Arab invaders like Muhammad bin Qasim from as early as 712 AD, and followed by Mongolians from around 1200 AD onwards. It's an interesting fact that there are compelling reasons to believe that India actually may be the most invaded country of all time. So therefore, the Independence Day is not only celebration of independence from Britishers, but also from all that invasions that the country had to suffer. But we would like to see it also an event that celebrates unity and diversity of the culture of the country, which has withstood test of times and remains the oldest living civilization on planet Earth. So Shashiji, what do you think was the cost of our freedom?
Thank you very much for organizing this event, Pandeyji, and namaste to Dr. Raiji once again. You have asked a very straightforward question. What is the cost of the freedom? And I got no qualms in suggesting that our freedom actually costed a lot. We have paid a very heavy price. It looks very funny because most of us were born in independent India. I'm sure even yourself too, Pandeyji. And till recently, I think, even now, we are busy migrating to richer countries. Itself is an indication that freedom that we attained on 1947 was not up to the mark, or that's not what we pursued to fulfill our dreams. So we all know the cost of this freedom. It can be explained in several categories, starting from economic category. There are records available. $45 trillion in current terms has been drained between 1750 to 1759 or something to 1938. The records are available by Dr. Usha Patnaik as well as Dr. Angus Madison. So a huge amount of money has been drained. Then what about our culture, tradition, religion? We have deracinated in all angles. You take the example of education. When the Britishers came to India, we have lakhs of schools, gurukuls in India. They were booming all over India, no illiteracy whatsoever. So now the education that we are pursuing has deracinated us because we don't love our own culture. And what about, for example, religion? Hinduism, the most ancient religion on this earth. And most of us Hindus, we are very apologetic about our own religion and faith and dharma. It's all because of the colonial experience, colonial narratives. And what about the history? We don't have any true sense of our own history. Our history, we call it as mythology. It should have been itihasa, but the colonizers call it as a mythology. So we have no sense of history. And we feel inferior and we glorify invaders of India. We feel pride in glorifying Mughals as well as British colonizers, because even in India, and of course in diaspora also, people want to speak the best possible English while forgetting their own mother tongue. In India, it is true, and even in diaspora Indians, I have observed the moment their children develops a local accent, they are very happy and they don't want to learn the local language, the Indian language, but still they are very proud of it. So we have deracinated. And the most important thing, it is a bit controversial. In the last 1,000 years, India has undergone repeated Islamic invasion and systematic European colonization. What is the net result? We have created a very powerful two minority groups in India. They are more powerful than majorities just because they are globally dominant groups. So these two minority groups within our country, they always play victim card. And international media and academia always supports them. And we have our own mistake of bringing secularism. This is the third form of colonialism, self-imposed colonization by Indians. So now what is happening? Our country is not able to handle this situation against these globally dominant minority groups within India, and they are enjoying the benefits of all the rights given by the Constitution and the legal fraternity. So as for myself, I'm considered ours is a wounded civilization, number one, and number two, we are still fighting for our survival. So it came as a huge cost, but still we are better than before. That's what I can say, and I'm still optimistic we can do something better to preserve our civilization. Thank you.
Dhanyavad, Shashiji. I think you turned around my question, and it made me realize that I was trying to investigate the cost of freedom, but even the cost of surviving that invasion and the occupation of the foreign invaders is huge, and not only in economic terms, but also in terms of our culture and identity. Very, 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 very thoughtful. Dr. Shishiraji, and from the Girmitia perspective, I think while I've seen that people who have, from Fiji, especially the Hindus who've settled in Fiji, they are very close to their culture. They've kind of preserved their culture, and in a way that has helped them stay proud of their culture. What Shashiji was saying, some Indian diaspora are now, they feel proud when their child develops in, a foreign accent, but which I have not seen in the Fijian community. But I'm sure the transportation of the Girmetias to the Pacific Islands and elsewhere, and their oppression and their exploitation had even more untold effect on that. So what would you think is the cost of freedom in terms of freedom from slavery and indentured labor for the Girmetia community?
Thank you, Rajinder. First of all, can I say I like to agree 100% with Sashibai on what he has said about cost of freedom. But before I answer your question, can I just add to what Sashi has said? And the greatest cost of I won't say freedom because independence. I don't agree India was ever given independence. There was a transfer of power from British to the several elites of India. So, and it's still today there's no independence because, as far as I know, India is still following the colonial penal system, judiciary system, education system, which was set up by Macaulay, and then it was set by the Marxist and the leftist. And India has a long way to go towards gaining full independence. To start off, I wanted to point that out. And secondly, the greatest cost of the 1947 independence or transfer of power was that Bharat was cut into three pieces. One third of India was handed over to people on basis of one religion, for one religion. And I think that is the deepest wound which was inflicted on India. And that's the greatest cost which the Indians had to pay for the so-called freedom. And after that, Kashmir, one half of Kashmir was invaded and occupied by Pakistan. And they are now after the other half of Kashmir. And then East Pakistan, which is Bangladesh now, they're not after, but West Bengal seems to be going that way as well. That certain community want that part of India to go towards being a Muslim nation as well. So that is the cost of independence in 1945. And we have to be very, very careful now that it does not happen. But recently I was asked to write an article to go in a book to mark the 75th anniversary of the independence. And it has been sent to India. It's been translated into Hindi and will be launched in Uttar Pradesh on 17th of August. And in that, I started by saying that the first war of independence was in 1857, led by Mangal Pandeyji. And in that war, which was also supported by Rani Lakshmibai, Jhansi Ki Rani, and I don't know the actual number, but thousands of brave Indians were killed. So we have to look at the human cost of the War of Independence, two wars of independence. One was 1857, and then the other one was in it started in 1941. The formation of Azad Hind Fauj, Indian National Army in Singapore. And before I go into that, I wrote, and still a lot of research needs to be done. So many Indians were killed, but so many were also taken prisoners. And some of these prisoners were originally sent to Andaman Nicobar Island, the Kalapani, but there were so many prisoners over there that they had to bring them back to the mainland, and they had prison, and that became full. And this is where the Girmitias come in, told that some of these prisoners were sent as indentured Indian laborers to the colonies. And I have got some anecdotal evidence of that, and I have written about that in this article. But there's much more research needs to be done. But in 1941 to 1943, Azad Hind Fauj, especially after Netaji arrived in Singapore in 1943, he called for the financial and military support from the local residents in Singapore, and a lot of women, local Girmitia women from Singapore, from Malaysia, and also from Burma, joined the army. And these were the Girmitias. Girmitias, the indentured laborers, are classified into two groups from India. One were transported under the Kangani system, which is from South India, basically. A majority of these Girmitias were in Malaysia and in Singapore and Sri Lanka. So those Girmitias who supported the war efforts were mainly Kangani, but also Girmitias from North India were transported to Singapore and Malaysia as well. And you may know there's a Jhansi Ki Rani regiment within the INA, in which majority of the women were descendants of the Girmitias. That was led by Lakshmi Saigal, and they joined the army freely. They gave their jewelry for funds. They donated cows, milk, and everything for the war efforts. And the greatest sacrifice was that this Girmitia men and women gave their life for a country which they had never set their foot on. I mean, this cannot be a greater sacrifice by anybody, for sacrificing for an imaginary motherland, Mathrubhumi. I think that has not been appreciated by many in India. So this briefly is the sacrifice of the Girmitias toward the independence of India, starting in 1857 and culminating in 1943.
Dhanyawad Satish for sharing that, and I really feel sad that, including myself, and I'm guilty of that, and possibly what Shashiji was saying, our history has been rewritten and in a way cleansed by the our, and as you said as well, the elite who took over the rule after Britishers left. These things have never been told, and the sacrifices of the Girmitias, and as you said, those people who never actually lived there, even they sacrificed everything. It's a sacrifice of the highest order and has to be appreciated. And I'm really hoping that the article that you have written in that book, will bring it up, and this video, when it goes out, it will increase the awareness of the Indian community in Australia and worldwide, and also the wider community, to understand the contribution of the Girmitias in not only the diaspora but also the freedom struggle of India. But that brings me to a question about, now we are in Australia, and a lot of people ask me that what's the relevance of Indian independence to Indians in Australia. So Shashiji, can I pose this question to you? So what would you say to them who say, that is Indian independence 75 years ago? Why are we celebrating it in Australia?
Can you hear me? Yeah. It can be answered in two different ways. For example, Dr. Satish Rai is a twice migrant. He didn't born in India. And how come it is relevant to him? And we ourselves, for example, Rajendra ji and myself, we are Australian citizens. And how come India's Independence Day is appropriate to us? If a host society, a member of host society, that is Australian society, asks this question to us, I think we should have the right answer without hurting his sentiments or her sentiments. So I can answer this question in part A and B. Okay, for part A, India is not just a nation state. India is a civilization state. So European Enlightenment recognizes territorial nationalism. Okay, but ours is not territorial nationalism. Ours is cultural nationalism or civilizational nationalism. So our country, as I said before, the 1,000 years of invasion, repeated Islamic invasion and systemic British colonization, we have become a wounded civilization. Our freedom was snatched away by the invaders because of our open architecture system. Now that on 1947 we gained political independence, but still it's better than before. It's a reminder, whether you for all the Indic communities, it's a reminder that this freedom that we attained, we should not lose it again in the future. We should be very vigilant. And this Independence Day is an occasion to celebrate it, respect it, appreciate it, and be vigilant not to lose it again. So it's a responsibility of every Indian community, like whether you are a Hindu or a Sikh or every Indian also. But basically, it's a civilizational thing, not just a national thing. And hence, we can, whether we are within India or outside India, we should celebrate this day. Okay, that's number one. Number two, we are in Australia. We are an Indian diaspora in Australia. We should not assume that this freedom is very natural for us in Australia. It is not. For that to happen, we should know the history of Indians in Australia. For example, between 1800 to 1900, within that 100 years, there were hundreds of Indians, and later they became thousands. Within these 100 years, maybe Dr. Satish Rai can tell me, Indians were indentured laborers in this country. They were even considered as slaves, but the local media called them as coolies, and we call them as coolie diaspora. They didn't have any rights in Australia. They worked as hawkers, housemaids, servants, farmhands, and so on. They didn't have any legal rights. In one of the Australian news magazine I was reading, the Archives, the Indian coolies, they complained against their boss, saying that they are not paying their wages. And they went to the court. And you know what the court has done? They penalized the Indian coolies, saying that you don't have any rights to complain against your boss. 1 week of imprisonment plus pay cuts. This was happening right just 100 years back. Then after 1901, the white-only policy was introduced by the founding father, Alfred Deakin. And Alfred Deakin, even the current prime minister and the previous prime minister, they proudly mentions Alfred Deakin is a friend of India. And he visited India in the 1890s. He wrote a book about India, Temple in Terms of India. But he never recognized Hindus as an equal citizen. When white-only policy was introduced, he didn't want Hindus in his Australian national plan. And the reason is very simple. That time, Hindus are also called as Hindu race. Hindu race was considered as inferior and primitive and cunning. And Australian media was claimed, that is all in records, it's not my own statement. They are also claiming Hindu men are very dangerous to white women. This is what we have undergone, our ancestors have undergone. So till 1970s, there was a white-only policy. There was no freedom of person of color, including Indians, and the number of Indians have dwindled after 1901, after the introduction of white-only policy. So this is about colonial Australia and Commonwealth of Australia. It's only in the last 50 years, again, we have the real freedom, political freedom and legal rights. But unfortunately, since we have a history of being colonized, 200 years of colonial scholarship has produced certain narratives that identify us. For example, in Australia, they identify us in their own terms, but we want them to identify us in our terms. But that is not happening so easily because of the colonial scholarship and colonial narratives. And this is where we have a double whammy. We have to deconstruct the colonial narratives of ourselves, plus reconstruct our own narratives. And Independence Day is the right occasion or a platform where we can discuss how to do it amicably in a host society without hurting anyone. Because we just want to have our own hyphenated identity. It is highly acceptable everywhere. Even in America, hyphenated identities are highly acceptable as long as you are a proud American. Same, we are proud Hindu Australians, but we should have our own right narrative as an insider. So this Independence Day is the right platform, right occasion to have a healthy dialogues, have some scholarship, and move towards gaining the real freedom or real independence. That's what I can say.
Dhanyavad Shashiji, impeccable answer again, and I think it has really motivated me as well to celebrate the Indian Independence Day and to actually share it with the wider Australian community to and start this conversation about and the contributions of India. And I think there is some interesting statistics I was reading, and when you mentioned that Indians came as slaves and were called coolies, and the kind of media bias towards them, and they're dangerous and cunning, and I have the statistics from few years ago. So there were 38%, this was about Indian Americans, as you mentioned. So 38% of doctors in America are Indians, and 12% of scientists in America are Indians. And interestingly, 36% of the NASA employees are also Indians. And around 34% of Microsoft employees are Indians. 28% of IBM employees are Indians. And I think 17% of Intel employees are Indians as well. So, from where we started and where we are, and it's because, as you mentioned, and Indians have been going to US for a long time for studies, and then they stayed there as scientists, and they made their contribution, and they too must have faced the same what we have faced in Australia. And these numbers that I just quoted can demonstrate their success, and it cannot happen without an open dialogue. Satish Raji, what is the significance of the Indian independence to the Gurmit community?
Once again, Shashi has opened up a very wide conversation. I was going to give a very simple, nuanced answer, but I like to come to Sashi's points or adding to Sashi's point. First of all, just saying, Shashi, I'm thrice migrant from Fiji to UK, UK to Australia. So yeah, thrice displaced. Let me just say, first of all, to answer Rajinder, your question. I have written an article that now that we live in a global community, there's a need for multiple identities and multiple homes. And for me, let me explain about myself. That probably makes sense. My Janam Bhumi is Fiji. We can never change that. And my Karam Bhumi today is Australia, and probably it's going to remain till I leave. But it was also Fiji and then UK. But my Matru Bhumi is Bharat. it can never change. So as a descendant of Girmitia, and Girmitias were never citizens of any other country but of India, because they were taken from India, and after independence of India, they were eligible to become Indian citizens had they been returned to India according to the agreement, but they were not. So they were always Indians, and India was their Janambhumi, and it is our Matrbhumi. So no matter where I live, or where most of the descendants of Girmitias live, they believe they are linked genetically, and their ancestors were linked to India. So we have great pride in celebrating anything good which happens in India, and getting freedom from colonizers is one of the greatest things, and we celebrate that. It does not mean that we have any lesser feelings for Australia. It does not mean that where my children live, my grandchildren live, have any lesser feeling for UK, or have any lesser feeling for Fiji, where I was born. So there's a simple answer why wherever we live, we will always support India, celebrate India. If anything goes wrong, we'll be sad. And if there's a need for us to help India, we'll be there. As if there's help needed in Fiji, we provide help in Fiji. If help is needed in Australia, in UK, we'll do that. Whilst Shashi was talking about Indians being brought to Australia as slaves, my mind goes back to the fact that the original Australians are now believed to be from India, mainly from South India. The Aboriginal people of Australia migrated to Australia 60, 70, 100 years ago from India. And today, genetically, I've read that 10% of the genetic composition of Aboriginal people is that of Indian genes. So Indians were here well before the Anglos came to Australia. The Indians then, 60,000 years ago, came in peace. We, Indians, whether from Fiji, from the diaspora, as twice migrants or thrice migrants, or directly from India, came to Australia in peace. But what Shashi describes as a host community, they did not come here in peace. They came here, they colonized the country, and they took over the country. And there's a difference. I just wanted to add that to Shashi. We need to talk in more detail about this, Rajan. And can I say something else, something recently I've discovered, and I've written a bit about it in my paper, Doctrine of Discovery. And I'm writing much more, a whole book about all this now at the moment. is that it was Australia which had colonized Fiji. The British just rubber-stamped it. It was Australian mainly, aided by some New Zealanders and some Americans who manipulated Fiji's chiefly system, installed a king over there, and finally persuaded Britain to rubber stamp. They could not colonize Fiji itself, Australia, because it was colony of Britain. So they had to persuade Britain to colonize Fiji on their behalf. And it was these same people, Australians, who recruited and transported my ancestors to Fiji. And so they have got an obligation towards the descendants of Fiji Gilmitias. As I have said before, after the coup in 1987, 2 coups, 2000 coups, 2006 coups, especially after 1987 coups, which was brutal, anti-Indian. 2000 coup was anti-Indian. When the Indians fled, descendants of the Indians fled Fiji to Australia. They wanted to be given a refugee status, because once you get a refugee status, the state is supposed to provide you a lot of assistance. They refused to do that. And I find that really, really tragic, because, as I said, it was for the Australians, especially the CSR company, which Shashi has done a lot of research on, and the big companies, the Burns Phillip, the Maurice Hastroms, and others. The Indians have served them for nearly 100 years. And they've made a lot of money. Like Shashi said, $45 trillion was taken away from India to Britain. It may not be $1 trillion taken away from Fiji to Australia, but it could be many millions or billions. But when it came for Australians to assist descendants of Gilmitias, they failed to do so. And this is something, you know, as the president of VHP and other members of our community seek help to raise to the Australian government. Still today, there's hardly any support, financial support or otherwise, given to descendants of Fiji Gilmitias by Australian government to settle here. The poverty rate of descendants of Gilmitias in Fiji is reaching up to 50%. Many are living in squatter settlements. And there's a lot of other issues. Maybe we can have a separate discussion on that. Yeah, so as we approached a celebration of the independence, I don't want to get too negative, but these are the issues I hope this forum can take up as we march forward.
And then you had Dr. Shishiraji, and I totally accept that when you said it's a celebration and you try to keep it positive, but it cannot be, we cannot close our eyes to what has happened, and in a way it's acknowledgement of the past, and in a way that it's sad, it makes me sad, but it also makes me feel proud of the heritage and the contribution of the Girimit community and across the Indian diaspora, across, from across the world. And we've heard stories about people in USA, in Britain. There were people who actually went and became barristers, including Veer Savarkar, and they could have had a very easy lifestyle, but they sacrificed everything and they undertook untold miseries to fight for the freedom of the motherland, especially with the Girimit community, which never even stepped in that country. So it is sad, but and sacrifice can never be, we cannot feel happy about it. For example, you mentioned if I think Shashiji mentioned the Indian War of Independence. Around 40,000 mutineers were killed during the 1857 War of Independence, the first War of Independence. And after that, in the next 10 years, it is said around at least 10 million Indians were killed, and they died in the next subsequent 10 years. So it is death is, and then in indigo farming. My family comes from Uttar Pradesh, and my grandparents told me stories about how they were forced to grow indigo. So all those things are definitely make me feel sad, but it also fills me with pride that they did not leave the hope. They did not give up, and they kept on fighting, whether it was under the Muslim invaders, when they had to pay the jizya tax, and they had to withstand extreme poverty and threat to their life and dignity, but they yet held on to their dharma. And similarly, all of our ancestors, regardless of the heavy hand of the British Empire, they kept that faith alive that one day we will have Swaraj, and we have achieved that. And Dr. Satish, I also mentioned that the world is a global community. And in the current geopolitical scenario, what do you think we can do to improve the relations between India and Australia, and how can we improve conditions of people of Indian origin, including for the Gurmat community, as you mentioned, in Australia better?
Oh, there's so many things we can do. Basically, I have to think about it. But the great thing is that I feel finally it's time for India and Indians to take its rightful place in the world once again. About 500 years ago, I have read that India had about 50% of world's GDP. Education, whole world, apart from the Americas, they came to India for education. Even when the British first arrived 200 years ago, India was the richest country in the world. Well before then, when what I call Alexander the Little came to conquer India, and I believe that he did not win. He was defeated by Porus, Purushottam, Prince King Purushottam. And we can talk about it. I think we should one day, because I've watched 299 episodes of Porus. Mayan Matbhumi is a wonderful TV series. I think we should talk about whether he was Alexander the Great or Alexander the Little, whether he defeated Porus or Porus defeated him, and he escaped India with his tails between his legs, and then he died a few months later. Yeah. So today, when we're living in a global world, a global digitized world, we can see what's happening throughout the world sitting in front of the television. And let me just share something. There's a new craze, a song, Shiva Shrotam, Mahadeva. And I think there was last about a week ago, there was 17 million views of this bhajan song, mantra. And I've seen reaction videos of about 20 people who are non-Indians. They were Africans, they were Pakistanis, they were Turkish, from Malta, from Italy. And they were also impressed. So the way I think we can improve the life of our people, whether in Australia or in the diaspora, is that first of all, we have to start appreciating, as Satish says, the civilization of Bharat. We have to have self-confidence. For nearly 1,000 years, we've been told that you are defeated people, you are conquered people, you are nothing. I hate the word when people use, not in positive way, but negative way, when they call indigenous Indians as coolies. That's a derogatory term. We are not coolies, we are human beings. We are Indians, but it's British because they wanted to dehumanize us. They called us those names. They called Africans as niggers. Why? We don't say that. I mean, I'm saying that because I want to don't use that word. I use the word term black, because black people have said that we are black and we're proud of it. We should say we are Indians and we are proud of it. And the greatest gift we can give to people of Indian origin or Indians is pride. We've got everything else. We have got 5,000 years of civilization. And I was watching Sadhguru yesterday again. He said the same thing. Why have we survived? As a civilizational people, we have the natural instinct to have those values. And no matter how much they put us down, it is there. The only problem is in a community in India, outside India, is that we had lost faith in our civilization, in our identity. We want to ape other people. We want to impress other people by saying how good English we can speak. But today, I'm impressed when a non-Indian person speaks in Sanskrit. I've watched so many videos where non-Indian people, they're singing bhajans, and they proudly sing bhajans. Yesterday, day before yesterday, I was watching a program where a Japanese boy, young boy, 11-year boy, lives in Rishikesh, and he was singing bhajans. He was saying mantras in Sanskrit, and he was telling our people, Indians, that you are doing wrong, that you are aping your colonizers. While outside world are now not aping, but taking on the civilizational values of Bharat. So my message to our people of this Independence Day is that you have to start believing in the values of Bharat, our Sanskriti, our culture, and it is our time. We have to be proud of it. And I'm basically very proud of it.
Dhanyavad, Dr. Shishiraji. And I think few things I just remembered that you mentioned the Aboriginal link. And so there was a gene, I think the M42 gene, there was a gene that was common between the Southern Indian and the Aboriginal, Northern Aboriginal gene. So there is our link. And my mother came to Sydney before I came to Australia. And when she came back, she said, "Oh, you know what, that's just like us." I said, "What do you mean?" They said, they do puja just like us, So she saw the smoke ceremony, and she thought this is how we do that. After the Havan also, you go around. So we obviously have a lot of connections. And you also mentioned the university, the education system in India. So the first university in India in the world was established in Nalanda in Bihar, and that was 500 BC. I was talking to my colleague this afternoon in my office, and I said that the oldest town in Victoria, I think, is around 200 years old. And I said, Banaras, where I come from, the oldest written reference is Gautam Buddha when he went to Kashi after he attained enlightenment. That was 500 BC. So this is such an old city that is very common for us. And in Nalanda, where I mentioned, there were more than 10,000 students from across the world who came to study. And this was again built in 4th century. So we had an international university. And right now we have universities in Australia and US where people go to study. But, India had that system. So, and obviously, I feel so proud, hearing from you as well, Satish Raji. So Shashiji, over to you. Same question for you. What can we do at the eve of our independence? What are the action items that we as people of Indian origin can actually undertake to improve the position of Indians or people of Indian origin in Australia? And also looking at a bit of geopolitical situation, the AUKUS, the agreement, or not the AUKUS, sorry, the what was the one? The between Australia and India?
Yeah, sure.
What is Quad?
Quad, the Quad, sorry, the Quad
Quad.
agreement. So what can we do in terms of the Quad agreement and the long-term cooperation between India and Australia?
All right. I don't have a right answer for your question because I can answer it in a different way. According to me, India-Australia relationship, it will grow at any cost. You and me, we don't need to do anything because India is growing. Whatever you do, India is going to grow. The whole world is under inflation. India's economic growth is very high this year and last year. So definitely wherever there is a market, India is a huge market. For countries like Australia, New Zealand, America, India is not a nation, it's a market. Definitely they will come to us and we will accept them, of course. So there will be a natural alliance between Australia and India. But what I wanted to speak about is, in order to do better in India and for Indians, whether inside India or in Australia, Indic communities or Indic groups, they have to do better as a cultural level and civilization level. I will give a short presentation, 2 minutes, to explain the current scenario. Okay, there are 5 types of Hindus now. Okay, I read it somewhere in the website. 5 types of Hindus. The first one is nominal Hindu. The second one is political Hindu. Third one is cultural Hindu. Fourth one is practicing Hindu. And the fifth one is accomplished Hindu. So who is a nominal Hindu? Nominal Hindu is a Hindu. He has got Hindu parentage. His legal name is Hindu. But he has got least affinity towards his own Hindu traditions and culture. And he has got no concern about the political situation of Hindu ecosystem. And they are the first people to mock and insult Hinduism. So they are called as nominal Hindus. They are normally secular and liberal in nature. Okay. The second type is political Hindus. Political Hindus are not so, there is no much difference between nominal Hindu and political Hindu. These political Hindus, they also mock their traditions. They don't have any respect, but they are politically aware that Hindu civilization or Indic civilization is under threat by the Islamic jihadis and Christian missionaries, but they don't want to do anything. Most probably they are in academia. They want to identify themselves as Hindu in economic, social, and political spheres of life. So these two, nominal and political Hindus, they are useless, but they are in good numbers. And the third one is cultural Hindu. They exhibit substantial Hindu identities because they love their culture. They visit temples, they believe in rituals, They believe in liberal arts of Hinduism, music, painting, dance, and including Bollywood dance. They are cultural Hindus. They may be or may not be politically aware, but still they are not bad. So the fourth one is practicing Hindus. Practicing Hindus, um, they love their traditions just like cultural Hindus. They also involved in studying Shastras. They love Hindu philosophy, and they always wanted to pursue some sort of Hindu wisdom, Hindu techniques. What are those? Like yoga, meditation, chanting, and all those stuff. And these are called as Hindu practitioners. Okay. And they identify themselves as Hindu both in private life and public life, unlike political Hindus. So practicing Hindus are the requirement of the day. And the last one is accomplished Hindu. Accomplished Hindus are very few, like Sadhguru, like yogis and gurus and acharyas, paramahamsas, they are called as accomplished Hindus. So in current scenario, all these five groups, they interact with each other, they overlap each other. Sometimes they hop in, hop out, but majority of them come under number 1 and 2, nominal Hindus and political Hindus. But what I propose or what I suggest, the sixth category I'm suggesting is civilizational Hindu. Civilizational Hindu means we are proud of our civilization, being a Hindu. We also recognize these five different types of Hindus exist in our community. We appreciate them, and we also do the Purva Paksha of our opposite or opponent civilizations. And we do scholastic studies, and we study Hinduism in a different way, institutionally. So then nobody can brainwash us, nobody can convert us, and nobody can dictate terms in us. So that is why we need to have these models, 3P model, like protection, promotion, and preserve models of propagating our civilization. That is what I propose. In order to happen, we need to study our own civilization institutionally, having an academic knowledge. Unfortunately, Dr. Satish Rai was talking about Grimitiya stories. If you explain this to Indian diaspora, those who came from India, I challenge maybe one or two people know about the stories out of 100. You know why the reason is? The reason is immediately after independence, Indian government never established any post-colonial Hindu studies department in their universities. See, when you start post-colonial Hindu studies department, all these histories of Indians in the last 2 years, what exactly happened to them, it will come up. It will be an institutional knowledge. And then everybody will come to know. It will appear in popular media, and then it will percolate into the society. And as of now, all these things look as foreign to us about Indians in Caribbean countries, Indians in South Africa. It's only I came to know when I went to Africa about their stories. And that is where I started reading about them. So we never studied all this in India because we didn't have any post-colonial Hindu studies. So what I propose is that we should have more and more practicing Hindus and civilizational Hindus. You may ask, what about cultural Hindus? Because most of the diaspora people are cultural Hindus. Cultural Hindus are good for the first generation, but for the second, third onwards, it will be diluted. So it's again back to zero condition. So yeah, that is what I wanted to say. And everything else will be taken care by itself. India is a growing market. It's a huge population. And everybody wants to come and invest there or develop a relationship, means the economic relationship with India. So I don't have any problem with that. I'm quite optimistic about it. But we need to take care of our civilization. For example, we have lost, as Shishiraji said, geographically, we lost the land because of the changes in the demography. Just imagine there is no Hindu in India. India will still exist as a land. And the people who are living in India are still called as Indians. They may not be Hindus. I don't want to have that situation for India. In order not to happen, we need to follow this 3P model: promote, protect, and preserve. That's what I wanted to say.
Dhanyavad, Shashiji. Very good message. And I think you're right. If we lose the civilization, then there is nothing left. And we are the oldest surviving civilization in the whole world. on this planet Earth. So, and that needs to be protected. And then when you were talking about those models, and I got worried. I don't know which model I'll fit into. So luckily, I was a practicing one. You know how we start self-evaluating,
Very
and
good.
I started feeling guilty. Then I thought, okay, I'm practicing one also, but I'll try to improve myself.
The sixth one, I think.
Yes.
Sorry.
The sixth one.
Sixth one. Yeah, I also
Civilizational
one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Civilizational one. But yes, definitely.
Easier one too. It is quite easy to follow the sixth one actually. It's quite easy. Just you need to study and analyze and observe. You see, unlike the practicing one, it's really tough. And the cultural one is also easier. But according to me, if you are in outside India, it's better to have the civilizational Hindu aspects. It's easier to follow.
That's a very good point. And having an objective and an measurable or quantifiable time, not exactly, but qualitative and quantitative combined and modeled in your mind can actually help you perceive, okay, this is what I should be aspiring for. And as you said, feeling proud about, as Satish said earlier, about your Indian heritage. And we spoke about being proud of the Indian flag and celebrating in Australia, and being confident about our hyphenated identity and using that to progress a bit of conversation in Australia and create awareness about the freedom struggle from where we come, our heritage and our civilization, and also to make sure that we identify ourselves as proud Hindus, proud Indians. This is where we come from. And also promote it and practice it openly, both in private life and public life. It has been an exhilarating discussion and very enlightening one for me personally. And we already have some to-do list for our next conversation. Like one of the things that Dr. Satish Rai mentioned was about the conditions of the Gurmit community in Australia. And I should say that I actually spoke to one of these in my multicultural commission, where I'm a member. I spoke to my chair. And I told her about the situation, what happened to the Fijian community when they applied for refugee visa, and she was shocked. And you're right. We need to have a conversation in the community, not looking for reparation, but at least having a conversation about what happened, and so that it does not happen again. And the Fijian community or the Gurmit community gets its due attention and support. While we are supporting openly everyone else, we should not forget the ones who came earlier on. So needless to say, Independence Day is a day worth celebrating, for which our ancestors have shed their blood and have struggled a lot to achieve that. On the Independence Day, from my perspective, I think we should ask ourselves, are we truly justifying the struggle and hard work of our freedom fighters? We should rethink and should work towards actual freedom of the people of the country by helping them and making them self-dependent and capable enough to support not just themselves, but also the country. So my message for my community is that, this Independence Day, we should dream of an India which is strong and powerful and has the capability to face any problems with unity, and not only for itself, but also for the entire world. So with this note, I would like to say thank you, Shashi Holla ji. Thank you, Dr. Shishiraji, for your valuable time and your valuable insight into the monumental significant achievement of India of achieving its 75th Independence Day. And we definitely would like to talk to you again. Until then, namaste, hari om.
Hari om.
Thank you, Pandey.